Within less than 10 minutes, a soldier who once fought for his country was dragged out of a hotel lobby like a vagrant, and then a sleek black SUV pulled up outside, carrying the very general who had once commanded him in war. That afternoon, the wind off Lake Michigan cut sharply across the face, slipping through every seam in a jacket. Inside the lobby of Rosemont Towers Hotel, Mr. Harold Hal Jensen, age 75, a U.S. Army veteran, sat quietly in an armchair near the large glass window. He wasn't sleeping. He had only leaned his head gently against the chair's edge, his left leg, an old wooden prosthetic, stretched out stiffly in pain. He was waiting for a call. At exactly 6 p.m., the Veteran Support Center would open his line to announce available shelter beds. That was his only hope for a roof over his head tonight. The public library had just closed early. The weather outside was freezing. He only needed to stay indoors for 30 minutes, but for someone like Hal, that was too much to ask without being seen as a blemish on the brand image. From the front desk, hotel manager Amanda Wells scanned the lobby. Her eyes landed briefly on the faded military coat, the worn-out backpack, and the exhausted look on his face. She briskly walked over, her voice tense but trying to remain polite. "Sir, this lobby is for guests only. I'm going to have to ask you to leave." Hal looked up. His pale eyes, clouded by age and the harshness of war, still held a trace of calm. "I'm not sleeping, ma'am. Just resting my leg. I've got a call to make at 6 about a shelter bed." Resting, sleeping, loitering, it's all the same. Amanda cut in, her tone sharper now. "You're not a registered guest. We can't allow anyone to hang around. It's policy." Hal tried to keep his composure. "I serve this country, ma'am. I'm just asking for 20 quiet minutes out of the cold." But she had already signaled. 2 security guards approached. The taller one grabbed his arm like he was some kind of security threat. "Let's go, Pops," one said bluntly. Hal staggered to his feet. His prosthetic leg slipped slightly on the tiled floor, nearly sending him to the ground. His backpack fell, the zipper springing open. A small picture frame tumbled out the face of a middle-aged woman, smiling gently. "My Bajasi, please," he said quickly, bending down. "Pick up your stuff outside." The other guard snapped, nudging the bag toward the door with his foot. In a single moment, the man who had once held the rank of staff sergeant, who had endured the scorching sands of Iraq, was shoved through the revolving door like he never mattered. The hotel lobby went silent. A little boy whispered to his mother, "Why are they pushing that old man?" The mother pulled him along without answering. Hal Jensen sank onto the curb, his backpack beside him, eyes fixed on the passing crowd as if he'd ceased to exist. And then an engine purred. A black Lincoln Navigator slowly pulled up and stopped right in front of the hotel. The door opened. A man stepped out, back straight like a blade, eyes sharp as steel. General Clayton Monroe had arrived. "No soldier of mine ends up on a damn sidewalk," he said. "Let's go fix this." No one ever truly prepares you for the battles that come after war. For Harold Hal Jensen, the deepest wounds weren't the ones carved into his body, but the ones he carried from everything he lost once he left the battlefield. He had once served as a staff sergeant in the U.S. Army, deployed to Iraq in the early 1990s. That's where he lost part of his left leg to an IED explosion on a dusty road near Fallujah. But Hal often said the greater pain came from realizing that when a war ends, a soldier doesn't come home the same. He comes back a different version of himself, quieter, fractured, and often forgotten. After returning home, Hal tried to rebuild a life. He opened a small auto repair shop on the outskirts of Aurora, Illinois, where he lived with his wife Linda, the woman who had written him hundreds of letters while he was stationed overseas. She was his anchor, the laughter on the days he didn't want to get out of bed. But after 38 years together, Linda died from cancer. The insurance didn't cover everything. The cost of treatment overwhelmed them, even with the modest disability benefits Hal received as a wounded vet. A year after her death, Hal was forced to sell their house. Then went the old pickup truck. Eventually, even the radio he used to follow Cubs Ghameshi's last link to the outside world. He once said, "It wasn't just my savings I lost, it was my footing in the world." At 75, Hal lived in the middle of a bustling city, yet felt completely cut off from it. Each day, he carried a backpack with a change of clothes, his military papers, a small photo of Linda, and the Bronze Star he'd been awarded but never showed off. "I didn't fight for medals," he said. I fought so people back home didn't have to. To most passersby, he was just a frail old man with a wooden crutch. They didn't see the soldier who once led a squad under enemy fire, who pulled his comrades out of the kill zone, who stayed awake night after night guarding the perimeter. Now, all he wanted was a warm place to spend the night in a quiet corner to make his shelter call at 6 p.m. It was a bitter truth. After a lifetime of sacrifice, he had to fight just to be allowed to sit in a warm hotel lobby like any other human being. And it wasn't the first time he'd been asked to leave. But this time, someone saw. Some calls aren't made out of desperation. They're made to hold on to the last thread of dignity. For Harold Hal Jensen, this was the call he had always hoped he'd never have to make. After being dragged out of the Rosemont Towers hotel lobby, Hal sank onto the curb, his back against a freezing brick wall. The wind off Lake Michigan lashed across his face in bursts, making his thin coat tremble with every gust. His worn wooden prosthetic leg, battered by years of use, ached with a burning throb. In his hand was an old flip phone, the kind given to people who had run out of choices. He glanced at his watch. 5:58 p.m. Just 2 minutes left until he could legally call the emergency veteran shelter intake linear line he'd been waiting on all day, clinging to the faint hope that tonight he might have a temporary roof over his head. At exactly 6 p.m., he dialed the number. A robotic voice answered first. Then came the flat tones of hold music. A few seconds later, a weary female voice came on the line. "We're sorry. All shelter beds are currently full due to high demand. Please call back tomorrow." Cold, curt. No apology, no alternatives, no human voice of care just. No room. Try again tomorrow. Hal sat frozen, a weight pressed against his chest like a boulder. All day, he had waited patiently, didn't complain when he had to sit outside the library, didn't protest when he was kicked out of the hotel, never begged for pity. But now what? He didn't even have a place to sleep, and the very system he'd once trusted with his life fell silent, as if he never existed at all. He unzipped his backpack and searched for a small business card, weathered and yellowed with age, sealed in a plastic sleeve. It read, General Clayton Monroe, direct line, 24/7. He'd received it on the day he was discharged along with a quiet instruction. If the system ever fails you, call me. No hesitation. Hal had never called. Not because he didn't need help, but because he didn't want to be a burden. He feared being too much. A part of him still clung to that old soldier's pride never ask unless you're backed into a corner. But today, he'd been thrown out like a ghost. And when he turned to the system for shelter, it slammed the door in his face. Hal's hands trembled as he dialed. The phone rang once. Monroe speaking. General, it's me, Hal Jensen, Staff Sergeant Hal. A brief silence. Then Monroe's voice dropped calm but alert. Jensen, what's going on? Hal explained short, like a field report. About the hotel. About the shelter turning him away. About the cold. About the utter silence from places that once swore they wouldn't abandon him. They kicked me out. The shelter's full. I don't know where to go. Monroe's tone turned razor sharp. Where are you? In front of Rosemont Towers, corner of 5th and Halstead. Stay there. Don't move. I'm 10 minutes out, and I'm not coming alone. The call ended. Hal stared at the screen, and something stirred inside him. A fragile but steady belief that even if the world turned its back, someone who once fought beside you will never let you sit alone in the dark. As the sleek black SUV glided through the crowded traffic on Halstead Avenue and stopped in front of the Rosemont Towers Hotel, every eye turned toward it. There were no sirens, no commotion, just a silent presence full of authority, and a reminder that honor still has a place in this world. Hal Jensen was still there, his back against the wall, his backpack beside him, his head bowed low, as if trying to shrink away from every gaze. He didn't know if General Monroe would come. He dared not hope what might happen next. But when the door of the Lincoln Navigator swung open and that familiar, commanding silhouette stepped out tall, upright, unwavering, he knew he wasn't alone anymore. General Clayton Monroe, former commander of the 23rd Infantry Division, a combat veteran of both the Persian Gulf and Afghanistan, and a congressional honoree for his work in veteran benefits reformed, did not come alone. Behind him walked two sharply dressed aides, a Navy officer from the Pentagon, and a representative from the U.S. Department of Veterans Affairs. None of them had scheduled this meeting. They were simply there, drawn together for one reason: a worn-out soldier who once stood tall under heavy fire for something greater than his own life. "No soldier of mine sits on the sidewalk like discarded luggage," General Monroe said, his voice rough but burning with resolve. He reached down to help Hal stand. The arm of a former commander, firm, familiar, lifted him back into the posture he once lived by. Upright, proud, head held high. Hal Jensen wasn't just a soldier who had served. He had led his platoon through a kill zone during Operation Desert Storm, saved 3 wounded men under heavy fire, and was awarded the Bronze Star for his valor, above and beyond the call of duty. After returning home, he volunteered as a mentor to recruits and was among the first veterans to sign a petition demanding better VA services for returning troops. According to U.S. law, every veteran is entitled to housing support, health care, employment aid, and basic human dignity. But for thousands like Hal, those rights only exist on paper, only for those who scream the loudest. Hal never screamed. He simply endured quietly, believing that America would not abandon men like him. And today, AmeriCorps, rather, the part of it that still keeps its promises to those who stood on the edge of life and death, showed up. As General Monroe stepped through the hotel doors with Hal by his side, the entire lobby seemed to hold its breath. The staff who had once looked at Hal with suspicion now bowed their heads. Amanda Wells, the front desk manager, stood frozen, her face pale as she realized the man she had tossed out for being a brand image problem was now being escorted in like a returning war hero by a 4-star general. No one said a word, but from the stairs, the stillness, and the heavy silence, something became crystal clear. A line had just been redrawn between true power and the kind borrowed from indifference. General Clayton Monroe stepped across the marble threshold, Hal Jensen at his side. The expensive suits and polished shoes scattered throughout the hotel lobby seemed to freeze mid-step. The front desk staff stared in stunned silence. The doorman, who had earlier turned a blind eye as Hal was dragged out, now bowed deeply, flinging the door open with both hands visibly trembling. And then, Amanda Wells appeared. The front desk manager, impeccably dressed, turned pale at the sight of the man walking in. Not just the veteran she had evicted less than 30 minutes earlier, but the man walking beside him, General Monroe, one of the most respected living military figures in the nation, a former congressional speaker on veterans' rights. General Monroe, "Sir, I didn't know you would be here." She reached out, perhaps to shake his hand, perhaps to salvage the moment. But General Monroe didn't extend his hand. He simply looked at her, eyes cold as ice. "Are you Amanda Wells?" "Yes, sir, I'm the front desk manager." "Then we need to have a conversation about the meaning of customer service, especially when that customer is a soldier who lost part of his body so you could stand here doing this job." No one spoke. No one dared interrupt. His voice wasn't loud, but every word landed like tempered steel. "I assume there's security footage of how you and your 2 staff members dragged Mr. Hal Jensen, decorated veteran, with a Bronze Star out of this lobby like a petty thief, simply because he didn't have a room key." Amanda tried to defend herself. "Sir, it's just internal policy. We can't allow anyone to stay if they don't." Monroe cut her off. His voice dropped low, quiet, and far more terrifying than any shout. "Policy is not an excuse to trample a man's dignity. And what policy allows you to treat someone who fought for the laws of this country like garbage?" He turned to an aide. "Call the CEO of the company that owns this hotel. Direct line, put it on speaker." Seconds later, a voice crackled through the phone. A confident middle-aged man spoke. "Hello, General Monroe. I was informed of the situation. If this is about a homeless individual, I'm afraid there's not much." Monroe's reply came cold and firm, cutting him off. "This is about a soldier who fought for your company's right to exist. A man who was thrown out of your branded hotel lobby while waiting on a call from the veterans shelter because he didn't have a key card." There was a pause on the other end. Then a hesitant reply. "I understand the awkwardness, but we can't break policy just because." Monroe didn't raise his voice. He didn't have to. He spoke almost in a whisper, but each word struck like a hammer. "You're not breaking policy. You're choosing between the reputation of your company and being blacklisted by the national veteran community over 18 million strong. Choose. The silence that followed was razor sharp. Everyone in the lobby held their breath. Monroe continued, not angry, just anchored in truth. And the truth was heavy enough. Either you issue a formal apology, fire everyone responsible, restructure your veteran accommodation protocols, and from this day forward, Hal Jensen becomes the symbol of how your company restores dignity to its soldiers. Or I will personally take this story to the press, to Congress, and the federal network. And I guarantee the echo will not stop in Chicago. The voice on the line now trembled. The tone completely changed. I understand. We sincerely apologize. I will personally write Mr. Jensen a letter of apology, and we will comply with everything you've asked. Although Hal hadn't said a word this whole time. He simply stood there, watching the man who had once commanded him not just protect him, but do something the country had long promised and never delivered. Stand by a soldier when he needed it most.